A community in unrest. It's night 4 of demonstrations in Kern County. We continue our extensive coverage on the death of George Floyd while in police custody.
I understand that obviously emotions are still extremely high, and people are really frustrated with something that goes on there.
Plus, local law enforcement is responding to those asking for justice and change.
And an independent autopsy shows contradicting information on how George Floyd died. The report adding to the unrest across the nation.
BPD, they want these guys to go home.
They should de-escalate the situation.
And it seems like nobody wants to listen. And the only way we're going to get them to listen is if we make noise.
Hey, guys, let us work here, okay?
We can actually walk down here a little bit.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
It's the video that's sparking a week of protests and demonstrations in America. It shows former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck during an arrest. Tonight, an independent autopsy report reveals Floyd's death was caused by asphyxiation. From coast to coast, even globally, thousands have taken to the streets to demand police accountability. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Emily Irwin in for Rochelle Murcia.
And I'm Erin Roney in for Dave Gonzalez. Well, we're going to take a look at what it was like in Minneapolis earlier today. People are still out protesting the death of George Floyd and others who have died from police brutality. Demonstrators were brought to their knees in prayer, silence, and stillness brought to some seething streets in Minneapolis. It's night 4 of demonstrations here in Bakersfield. A prayer vigil is being held right now in downtown Bakersfield for the Floyd family and protesters. The local pastor who organized it says it's meant to bring the community together. Regardless of their religious beliefs, Elizabeth Christian is at the Liberty Bell with more. Elizabeth, what do you got for us?
That's right, Erin, Emily. Right now, you're taking a look at just the start of this prayer test arranged right downtown outside of the Liberty Bell by Pastor Angelo Frazier. Right now, people are still gathering and getting started. Quite a different scene that we've seen the last few days of this prayer test. People just beginning prayer warriors out here. I spoke to Pastor Angelo Frazier earlier. He is a pastor at River Lakes Community Church, and he says that prayer is the answer. He wants to redirect anger. What he's seen over the last few nights is quite different than what he's used to seeing. Over 30 years he's lived in Bakersfield, and he's never seen anything like this. Like I said, he wants to redirect this anger and direct it towards prayer. Right now, let's go ahead and get a word with him. He's right here by the cross, as you can see. Pastor Angelo Frazier, do you mind talking with the people right now? We're live, and just kind of going over the message that you want to portray when we get into this prayer test.
The message is simply that prayer over protest, that in troubled times, that's what we need to do is pray. And that we can be visible in doing that. And my hope is that this would catch on just as the fires are catching on across this country, that people need to see hope. And we can get hope through prayer. And I'm just asking the community to come out and to pray together as one people. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative, just come out and pray. We all know something is wrong.
Thank you so much, Pastor.
God has the answer.
Thank you so much, Pastor. Well, you heard it straight from here, from Pastor Angelo, that we are just getting started for this prayer test, and he's welcoming more people to come on down at the Liberty Bell downtown to go ahead and take part in prayer for the country, prayer for Bakersfield, and prayer for change. I'm reporting live in Bakersfield, Elizabeth Christian, Eyewitness News.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Emotions are still running high after some of the peaceful weekend protests escalated to arrests. Hundreds of protesters calling for justice and asking for change. Jeanette Quesada spoke to Bakersfield Police about the new dialogue they're working on. Jeanette.
That's right. Well, after 3 days of protesters demonstrating and marching, I spoke with BPD today to address some of those concerns, and they tell me they are working to open up the floor for discussion and for more conversation. It's been 3 days of protests.
I want to see action.
3 days of marching, rallying, and calling for action.
I want the accountability of our police force. I want open investigations. Open investigations of the misconduct of our police force.
Protesters rallying at MLK Park to pour out their frustrations.
I understand that obviously emotions are still extremely high and people are really frustrated with something that goes on there, and we understand that, but we do want our community to stay safe.
Protester Matthew Pierce says he would like to see more transparency and accountability from police when critical incidents and officer-involved shootings are being investigated. Pierce says he would like to see a civilian review board. He says this would offer an objective judgment to investigations involving officers.
Most police, when they're investigated by internal affairs. So that means that police are investigating police, which I don't think is right. I don't think that's resulted in a lot of progress with all the systemic racism that we see in our justice system.
I asked BPD who forms part of the review board.
The review board is our captains and our assistant chiefs, and they go through and they look at every aspect of a critical incident. Usually it's an officer-involved shooting or in-custody death.
BPD says a citizen review panel has been discussed, and they are willing to continue the dialogue. That's why Tuesday they will open up the floor to the public for further discussion in a meeting via Zoom.
Please reach out to us. Whatever method you feel comfortable with, there's an opportunity for a conversation.
Hoping to address Pierce's concerns as well as many others.
We're also looking to have opportunities to have a productive conversation about how to move forward from here.
Now, if you're interested in being part of that meeting will be held tomorrow from 1:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And in order to make a reservation and get a link, Zoom invitation to that meeting, you can email bpdcommunity@bakersfieldpd.us or arlenawaller@gmail.com. Now, I do want to take a moment to point out we are standing right in front of BPD headquarters right now, where BPD is just prepared in case another protest gets underway today. But take a look behind. Right now, the memorial has a lot of signs and messages of support from the community. Earlier, 3 days ago, whenever the first initial protest took place, this memorial was tagged. We had volunteers that came and cleared the memorial after it had been tagged. But right now, there are messages of support right in front of the memorial. And again, BPD is preparing in case there is a fourth protest this evening. For now, I'm going to send it back to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Well, just to reiterate what she just said, Bakersfield Police is now looking to open the conversation with the community by hosting a virtual discussion. Now, it will be held on Zoom, as Jeanette just said, by Police Chief Greg Terry and a panel of community members. The goal is to talk about the recent protests and how much they affect people in Bakersfield. Again, that meeting will start tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon, and it should run till about 3.
Meanwhile, 9 protesters were arrested on the third night of protests in Kern County.
Back! Get back now! Get back! We're getting pushed over here. We got to get back.
This was the scene last night in Bakersfield. The protest began peacefully but quickly escalated. Fireworks were thrown in the crowd and police barriers torn down. In response, police tried to push people back, leading to arrests.
And an independent autopsy shows George Floyd died of asphyxiation from neck and back compression. That's different than the findings by the county medical examiner where George was killed. It reported no physical findings of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. Floyd's family attorney says the new autopsy indicates Floyd died when he was in police custody.
For George Floyd, the ambulance was his hearse. Beyond question, he would be alive today if not for the pressure applied to his neck by fired officer Derek Chauvin.
The criminal complaint against former officer Derek Chauvin says he held his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 8 minutes. It says for almost 3 minutes of that time, Floyd was unresponsive.
And during his COVID-19 press briefing today, Governor Newsom addressed protesters in California.
So for those of you that are out there protesting, I want you to know you matter. And I want you to know I care, we care. And I don't want to just demonstrate that rhetorically. I want you to know that I have a unique responsibility to prove that to you, not just assert it. You've lost patience, so have I. You are right to feel wronged.
The governor went on to say society has to be better and do better in these types of situations.
From coast to coast, thousands have taken to the streets to demand police accountability after George Floyd was killed about a week ago in Minneapolis. Rising anger has exploded with protests in all 50 states over the weekend. Many were peaceful, but some did turn violent. Peaceful protests in Portland, Oregon turned rowdy after midnight. Earlier in Philadelphia, cop cars were set on fire. In Atlanta, police dragged a pair of college students out of their car for breaking the city's curfew. Now, the officers were fired for using excessive force. Meanwhile, George Floyd's brother called for an end to the violence.
What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing, because that's not going to bring my brother back.
Investigators say some of the violence is being fueled by far-right and far-left extremists and other agitators.
Meanwhile, outside the White House, demonstrators gathered for the fourth day in a row.
We're all just people, and we just want to be treated equally.
Inside the White House, President Trump demanded a more aggressive response from the nation's governors to address protests that have turned violent.
You have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. You're going to look like a bunch of jerks. Most of you are weak.
The Bureau of Prisons is sending special riot teams to Miami and Washington, D.C. National Guard units have also been activated in at least 23 states. ICE will also be deploying special teams across the nation. Officials say they will not be making immigration arrests at protests, however.
And the cities that fared the best proved listening may be the best weapon against violence. In Santa Cruz, California, the police chief kneeled in solidarity with marchers. Meanwhile, in Des Moines, Iowa, protesters asked officers if they kneel with them for a moment of silence, and they did. In the midst of a giant crowd of protesters in Brooklyn, 2 officers also took a knee.
If I can take a knee with the community to garner and broker peace, then I'll get on my knee every day.
So far, only 1 police officer has been charged in Floyd's death, but activists in Minneapolis are calling for the arrest of 3 others who were there and didn't stop the brutality.
And coming up next on Eyewitness News, confusion over the coronavirus, the trouble Kern County has been having with the state over numbers, and the new cases reported today.
Plus, protests go global, a look at the reaction to George Floyd's death around the world.
And you're taking a live look right now at one of those protests. This one's in Detroit, Michigan, and we'll be right back with more.